Hi, my name is Winsley, and welcome to my video tier list going over all of the 12 vision quests that are in Age of Wonders 4, including their criteria to complete and the rewards you get from each of them. I realized that I wanted to make this video when I saw that the goals and rewards are not given to you in this menu that you see when you're designing your faction, and that it would be helpful for me and others to know what each version of the vision quests give you. These vision quests, aka prophecy traits, were introduced in the Archon Prophecy DLC for Age of Wonders 4, and I expect a lot of the numbers that we're going to look at today are going to change in the near future, especially the order variant of Visions of Promise that a few people in the community have been less than happy about. They think it's pretty easy to complete, and I do feel partially responsible for that. In case you missed my tips video from last week, I highlighted how easy the order variant is to complete and how powerful the bonuses are that you get from it. I've seen a couple people saying that is basically like getting 3 society traits for 1. It's like having the bonus from Hermit Kingdoms, the bonuses from Adept Sellers, and the best part of Perfect Artisans, all in just 1 society trait. To be fair, you only get 1 of those bonuses on turn 1, and the others are something that you can unlock in the first 10 or 15 turns of the game if you just beeline towards the quest objective, which is just very, very powerful when you compare that to not only the other society traits that are in the game, but all of the other vision quests that we get in Archon Prophecy. But like I said, I think it's very likely, at least, that this version of Visions of Promise will get reworked sometime soon. So without further ado, let's jump into the tier list. And you guessed it, we're going to start with my favorite one, the order variant of Visions of Promise, which right now, as of recording this video with the numbers that I have in front of me, is just the best one. It's S tier. It's amazing. Not only do you get a free unit on turn 1, you get some very good bonuses relatively early in the game, which we will hop over in-game in a second to discuss. But before we do, I did want to mention that the Visions of Promise are designed to be more early game focused. The Visions of Destiny are designed to be more mid-game focused, and the Visions of Ruin are designed to be more late game focused. When you start a new game with the Visions of Promise, you get this pop-up on turn 1, and this one will give you a Paladin unit, which is an amazing tier 3 unit. This one gives you a Glade Runner, which is a pretty decent tier 3 unit, but being ranged, it has limitations on what it can do in certain situations. And the Materium one gives you extra stability for having magic materials within your border. I would say that this one is easily the best bonus. If you just look at the Paladin unit, you can see that it has a pretty strong melee strike, a very strong single action attack that puts the unit in defense mode, and a healing ability that's on cooldown 3. The healing ability does require that the Paladin is standing next to the unit that it's trying to heal, but that's a very good heal, and this is a very good attack that turns the shield unit almost into a charge unit. I've found in my test games that it only takes 7 or 9 turns to march my army from my capital all the way over to the quest marker that you get with the Visions of Promise order variant, and that is something that allows you to complete the quest around turn 9 or 11, because you do have to siege this down. I think it starts with 20 fortification in the current version of the game. And then when you get there, all you have to do is defeat the army to complete the quest, whereas the nature variant requires that you spend some turns rebuilding the ruins that are part of its quest. As you can see here, I didn't take any losses in this playthrough, but in my one that I streamed right before Archon Prophecies was released, I found that the fight was a little bit tougher. I think they had Infectious Insanity or something like that. That led to me losing a couple units. So while this seems relatively easy right now, I do think there are situations that will make this quest a little bit harder to complete. And let's just dismiss this. Yeah, we got a reward, and you can see right there that this is just our throne city. We not only don't have to spend Imperium, we get a little bit of Imperium out of this quest, and we get extra city cap as well as a bonus on the city, granting plus 20% to all resources generated in this city. So that's the part that's kind of like Hermit Kingdom. Getting an extra unit is kind of like Perfect Artisans. And the fact that you get this extra city cap and you don't have to spend Imperium on your first city makes it a little bit like Adept Settler. So as you can see, it's kind of like getting 3 society traits for 1, and it's just very good in general. It does mean that your second city is going to be in a location that you do not get to choose, and that will be pretty far away from your other city that you started with that is now no longer your capital. But another thing that's worth noting here is this city starts with population, and that is not nothing. That means that that city is going to be able to develop itself a little bit quicker, getting access to things that will boost production on certain city structures. The next vision quest we're going to look at is the nature variant of Visions of Promise, which I consider to be A tier. It's pretty similar to the order variant in that it gives you extra city cap and a free unit. I just feel like it comes online a little bit slower, therefore it's not quite as good, and I don't like the unit that you get from this vision quest as much as the one I get from the order variant. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you take the nature version of Visions of Promise, you do get a free Glade Runner, which is not a bad unit, it's just not as good as a Paladin. It is worth noting that the quest is about the same distance away from your capital as the Order variant, but there are some other trade-offs that are worth considering here. The first thing I realized that was different when I got to this fight right here is that it is a significantly stronger stack, and you might end up losing units as a result of that. But not only that, once you've completed the fight here, once you've defeated the enemies, you end up getting a item, as well as you need to spend a little bit of Imperium actually founding the city. It's going to take 4 turns past when you take the fight to clear out the enemies. I was able to get here in 7 turns, which is the same amount of time it took me to get to the order quest, but then I didn't have to wait 4 turns with the order version of the Visions of Promise, whereas with the nature version, you're going to have to wait at least 2 turns. Maybe if you have the haste berries and this unlocked, you can do it a little bit quicker, but that seems a little bit unlikely in general. So I do not like the fact that the timeline on the nature quest takes longer. I do not like the unit that you get, but after 4 turns, you'll see that the rewards you get from completing the quest are pretty much identical with the order variant of Visions of Promise. You get an extra city cap and you get an extra 20% bonus to all resources that are generated in your new throne city. The Materium version of Visions of Promise is easily my least favorite out of the 3, and while it's not amazing, it's not the worst one out of everything that is available to you in the other prophecy traits. It takes a lot longer to get online, and that's a big part of why it's further down on this list, but the rewards you get from it are reasonably okay if you're playing on the defense. If you have somebody trying to attack your throne city, you get a pretty powerful bonus, but at the same time, if somebody's attacking your throne city, you're probably in a pretty bad spot on the map, and I think getting early game momentum is more valuable than what you get out of this version of Visions of Promise. Now, when you take the Materium path for Visions of Promise, you'll notice that you get extra stability in your city per magic material, and it has very different requirements in order to unlock the main bonus you get from this quest line. You need a tier 4 city, 16 population in your city, and you need to have harmony level stability in that city, which is relatively hard to accomplish. I found that it took me about 24 turns in order to complete the requirements on my city to complete this quest, and while I think you could accomplish it faster, I think it's pretty reasonable to expect that it'll take about 24 turns in order to get this reward, which, as you can see here, gives you that extra 20% bonus to all resources produced in that city. But it also makes it so that an Earth Titan is summoned next to one of your units at the beginning of combat. When I first read that, I said, okay, that's great. The delayed reward is worth it, because that sounds like something that can happen in any combat. That's actually very valuable because that's a tier 5 unit. But then I realized that effect is actually locked into the city itself. It's something that you only get when you're fighting within the terrain of your, or domain of your capital. If somebody's trying to siege your capital, you'll be able to trigger this effect to make it so that you have an extra very powerful unit to defend the city, but it's not going to come into play in all combats. That would be a little bit overpowered, and I can see why this effect works the way it does. My one thought on this, on a way to make it more interesting, would be make it a less useful unit, like a stone spirit or two, maybe the tier 3s that can just appear in all combats. That would make the delayed reward on this a little bit more worthwhile, in my opinion. All right, now we're moving on to the 6 Visions of Destiny vision quests. And while I haven't tested them all extensively, I did find that it took me about 34 turns to complete the Materium Vision of Destiny. And I'm a pretty big fan of the rewards that you get, as well as the criteria that you need to fulfill in order to complete this questline relative to the other quest lines for Vision of Destiny, and that's why it lands in the A tier for me. So there are 2 main objectives that you need to complete in order to get the reward for the Destiny of Materium. The second one, having 8 of 8 Materium, is the most straightforward and easy to explain. If you have 8 Materium from your tomes and or society traits, then you're going to be able to complete this part of the objectives. And then the other one is going to keep track of points based on how many special province improvements, city structures, and city tier structures that you make inside of your cities. I think you get less for city structures than the city tier structures, and then the special province improvements give the most. If I remember correctly, I was about to force out this one, and that would give me at least 15 points towards that tracker and would allow me to complete the Destiny of Materium. Once you do that, you get the mark of Materium, making it so that all units that have this mark gain plus 50% damage on retaliation attacks, and fighter, shield, polearms, and mythic units grant plus 1 retaliation attack. That's basically all units that get retaliation attacks, aka melee units, and this is going to be applied to all owned units. I don't think you have to own the units when you complete the quest. If you build them later on, they should also get this mark of Materium. The Earth Titan and Golden Golem also become available during Rally of the Liege events, which is pretty significant because these units are quite valuable late game units that you would usually need to unlock with tomes, but they are relatively expensive, so even if you do unlock them in the mid-game around turn 44 or so, they are something that you're going to need to have resources in order to get through Rally of the Lieges. They're not free units. Now, I will admit, I didn't go through the motions of completing each of these other vision quests the normal way in game. I use console commands in order to see what the requirements are and the rewards, just in the interest of time. So some of my rankings here might be a little bit off of where they actually land based off of real game experience. I think the order version of Visions of Destiny is A tier, specifically in single player situations where it will be a little bit easier to make allies to fulfill this requirement. But if you're in multiplayer, you're probably going to have opponents that want to deny you that easy ability to fulfill your requirements. And I think for that reason, it could be lower down. But I think generally speaking, I really like the requirements and the rewards associated with this vision quest. Now, if we look in game, we can see the things that you need to do in order to complete the Destiny of Order objectives. Like with the other one that we just looked at, the Destiny of Materium, you need at least 8 points in the appropriate affinity. This one requires Order affinity. And yes, I did just use the console command that gave me a bunch of affinity by completing research, and I'm going to do that on this guy in order to get the last points that I need in order to complete the Destiny of Order. Each alliance that is formed with a AI will give you 150 points. Right now I'm at 450 out of 500 because I went through the motions and allied these 3 guys before recording this last part. But you can also get points by vassalizing cities and destroying infestations, which are generally things that players do in the course of a normal game. And let's go ahead and see what happens when we complete all of the objectives. We get the Mark of the Order, which makes it so that units get +4 resistance, and Inspiring Killer, which will make it so that when you kill an enemy unit, the morale bonus to itself and allies will be better. You'll be able to get better morale a little bit more easily when you are killing off enemy units. And you also get the ability to get the tier 3 light spirits, the tier 3 blessed souls, and the Astra unit through the Rally of the Lieges. And this unit, the Astra, is one that is relatively strong compared to other tier 5 mythical units. So that is another reason why I'm a pretty big fan of this version of Visions of Destiny. The next Vision of Destiny that we're going to talk about is the Chaos variant, which I feel like is relatively easy to complete compared to some of the other Visions of Destiny, depending on the map you're playing on. And if you're in single player or multiplayer, it might be easier or harder to complete. But I think that it's relatively easy to complete when you compare it not just to the other Visions of Destiny, but all of these other vision quests, and the reward you get from it is quite substantial as well. Now, if we look in game, we can see the objectives you need to complete in order to get the rewards from Destiny of Chaos. You get points for conquering cities, slaying heroes, and for defeating an empire. I found that when you defeat just a single empire, you get all the points you need in order to complete this aspect of the objectives for Destiny of Chaos. There is, of course, the affinity requirement that all of the Destiny of Vision or Visions of Destiny, that's what they're called, require in order to get the main reward. If we end turn here, we will see the enemy attack into us. And yes, I did use console commands to make it so that I just win this auto combat. And when we do that, not only will we have completed our quest, we'll have to go through another menu here where we dismiss skeletons and say this is our interaction we want for defeating another player. Now we can actually see the reward that you get for completing the Visions of Destiny Chaos variant. We have the Mark of Chaos, which makes it so all owned units gain plus 10% crit chance and the ability to get lifesteal, which fits really neatly into the Chaos unit lineup. A lot of them deal a lot of damage and benefit a lot from gaining lifesteal off of their attacks. I think they changed lifesteal recently so that it doesn't heal for every enemy unit hit. It heals for every attack done, but that's still a relatively useful effect for the Chaos units and what they generally do, which is damage pretty quickly. You also get the ability to recruit the tier 3 Inferno Hounds, the tier 3 Nightmare units, and the tier 5 Balor, which is a very strong mythic unit that does some pretty cool stuff with its secondary effects. This is a very popular unit in the multiplayer community, and being able to get access to it just by defeating one player, I think is going to be something that leads people to really liking this Vision of Destiny questline. But at the same time, if you're not able to defeat another player, there may be other society traits that benefit you more. The next version of Vision of Destiny we're going to take a closer look at is the Astral variant, and I have to say I'm a very big fan of this one. I thought about putting it in the S tier or the A tier, and I think that it might actually be better than even the Chaos one we were just looking at, because the objectives are things that people generally do in most games anyways, and the reward is quite exceptional. It's quite strong relative to some of the other rewards you get for Vision of Destiny. Now, if we look in game, we can see the requirements for completing the Destiny of Astral, and I have to say, being able to get points for unlocking tomes and clearing ancient wonders seems very strong in general, because all players will be unlocking tomes throughout a game, and they should be focusing on clearing out ancient wonders as much as possible. I found that clearing gold wonders like the Palatal Prison over here and the Mechanical Strong Room gave 200 points towards this tracker, and that clearing silver wonders gave 100 points, and bronze wonders were giving 50 points towards this tracker. So in general, I would probably focus more on silver wonders and gold wonders when trying to complete this objective quickly. If you're able to clear them out anyways, you do get some really nice rewards. I believe I have always win auto combats on here. There we go. We win this one, and we're going to be able to get all the points we need to complete this objective. I didn't go through the motions to see how much you get for completing a tome, just in the interest of time, but I am kind of curious about that. So if anybody has done the research, please feel free to leave a comment explaining how that part of Visions of Astral or Visions of Destiny Astral variant, or whatever it's called, I think it says Destiny of Astral at the top left. The Mark of Astral, as I mentioned earlier, is very powerful. This gives plus 20% experience gained on all units that you own. That's just across the board. That's so powerful and so good, especially with the way rounding works with experience. I had some people in my Discord talking about this recently, and any boost you can get to experience gain pays off incredibly quickly. There's also the fact that all of your units are going to have +2 resistance, and magic damage is one of the main sources of damage across the game. Having +2 resistance means that you not only are going to take less damage from spirit damage, but also from fire damage and from lightning damage, and all of those damage channels that are associated with magic. Basically, you won't get extra resistance from physical attacks, but that isn't a giant source of most builds' damage. There's also the fact that you're going to be able to get the Lost Wizard unit and the Mage Bane unit through Rally of the Lieges, which are two of the most powerful units in Age of Wonders 4. These guys have been in the game, I think, since day one, and they are just terrifying to fight. The Forbidden Tome ability on the Lost Wizard being something that you can use every other turn is incredibly powerful, and the Mage Bane's innate Spelljammer is incredibly powerful as well. The next two vision quests we're going to take a look at are probably my least favorite out of all of the 12 vision quests. I'm not a fan of the nature variant of Visions of Destiny or the shadow variant of Visions of Destiny because of the requirements that you need to complete in order to get the bonuses. I think for that reason, this one is probably in D tier, and with some cheesing of certain interactions, you might be able to take it up to C tier, but I'm generally not a fan of this nature variant. Now, if we look in game, I think you'll see pretty quickly why I'm not a fan of the Destiny of Nature questline. It has that objective where you need the affinity. That's pretty normal for all of the Visions of Destiny quest lines, but this other objective you need to complete, claiming provinces, is something that takes a really long time in order to complete because you only get 15 points for each province that you claim, meaning you have to claim 34 provinces across the map in order to get to the rewards, which admittedly are pretty good. It just takes a really long time in order to claim this much territory. And it took me a long time just to type in, I think it's make pop in the console commands to complete this quest line. So in general, it seems like that is pretty annoying relative to some of the other objectives. And this Mark of Nature is admittedly pretty good compared to some of the other ones. Getting Grace whenever a friendly unit dies is going to make it so that your armies are fairly hard to deal with and will be able to just last longer in combat. And the fact that when enemy units die, you get strengthened will also make it easier for you to deal damage to the enemy. But these units that you get through Rally of the Lieges are relatively weak when you compare them to some of the other units that people unlock when they complete their version of Visions of Destiny. And then the extra bonus you get here, where all cities gain mana income equal to 50% of their food production, is significant. It's quite nice to get something on top of these units that aren't nearly as useful as other units, and this pretty significant mark. But I think generally speaking, that's there to make up for the fact that this one is relatively annoying to complete compared to the other Visions of Destiny, or relatively difficult, I think might be a nicer way of putting it. But I do think that claiming provinces only giving you 15 points is quite limiting and restrictive, to the point where I just don't see myself wanting to take this version of the Visions of Destiny. Hi, hello, this is Future Winsley going back to re-record my analysis of the Shadow variant of the Visions of Destiny. I've been hearing a lot over the past few days that this is actually very easy to accomplish and gives some very good bonuses. So it's actually super popular in the competitive multiplayer server that Cody runs. And I have to admit, I was very wrong about the objectives. They're actually quite easy to accomplish. I've been hearing that usually most of the guys over in the competitive multiplayer server can complete this one around turn 25, but if you know what you're doing, you can complete the first objective within the first 10 turns of the game, which seems ridiculous to me. I thought it was one of the harder goals to accomplish, but apparently it's actually one of the easier ones to accomplish. I guess that's what I get for not going through the motions on all 12 of these vision quests before starting recording this video. But I do have to say that I think most casual players who don't play the game in multiplayer will struggle completing this objective in a timely manner, and so you may rank it lower down on your own personal tier list depending on your level of experience and the way you like to play the game. But yeah, you can start getting tier 5 units around turn 17 of the game, and if you play Feudal Monarchy, there's no upkeep associated with that, so it's actually incredibly good, incredibly useful. And I don't know if it needs to necessarily be nerfed across the board, because that'll kind of make this vision quest unattainable for the majority of players, of people who don't play multiplayer. But at the same time, having this option in the game for people who do play multiplayer will make it so that they have to either outright just ban this society trait or this variant of the Visions of Destiny. I wish I had a little bit more time to go through the motions of completing the Shadow variant of Visions of Destiny, and to prove that you can start getting these higher tier units around turn 25 if you use that specific society trait. But I have been hearing from quite a few people that it's not too unreasonable to complete this version of Visions of Destiny by turn 25, given how it only requires 500 shadow points, and when friendly units die, you get 10 points, and when enemy units die, you get 5 points. I think I really underestimated this aspect of it, which allows you to get some benefits from farming aggressively and losing units. In order to kill a lot of enemy units, you're going to want to farm aggressively, and losing units isn't too terrible, so long as your farming stacks are able to continue farming and you have other ways to bring units along to help you with that farm. I have been seeing that if you do use these society traits to get the higher tier units, you're going to have much higher tier units than your enemies will if they aren't using the new traits. I think if we look over here, there's some tier 1 and tier 2 units on one side of the fight, whereas everything on the other side of the fight is, well, there is a tier 2 support unit in here, and that is worth considering. But in general, most people only have tier 3 units around turn 25 or so. So if you're able to get these guys online quickly enough, they are going to be very valuable in any kind of game, whether that be teams or free-for-all, small map or large map. Just having these guys online earlier is very valuable. And I have been hearing that if you really practice this general strategy, you can complete the 500 points by turn 10. And then I guess Morgie was able to get the 8 shadow affinity they needed to complete the full quest by turn 15, and then rally in a tier 5 unit on turn 17. It seems pretty crazy, pretty ridiculous, but it is something that people are able to do reasonably quickly based off of what I've been hearing. And yeah, if you want to see me actually try this out, I'm thinking I might make a separate video about how you can unlock tier 5 units in the first 20 turns of the game. Depends on how much time I have next week, because I want to do a DLC tier list next. That's what we'll do next week. Now we're ready to start looking at the Visions of Ruin, which I have to admit are not nearly as good as I thought they would be, given the amount of investments that you have to make to complete them. The Astral variant is one that I keep going between B tier and C tier, because the benefit you get is something that benefits everyone, and I'm not a giant fan of that, because that could end up hurting you more than it helps you in the long run. People who watch the dev stream may remember these requirements that you need in order to complete the Visions of Ruin Astral variant. The Desolations of Magic require 2,000 world casting points or combat casting points to be spent. You don't need to spend 2,000 of both of them. It's a combination of the two things, as well as you need 2 sets of magic materials and 1 gold ancient wonder bound to a outpost or a city, which even with console commands took me 10 turns to do, because, well, there's quite a few magic materials that need outposts built, and then you need to build an outpost with a camp in order, a work camp in order to attach it to a gold wonder quickly, and you need to have this spell, the Bind Gold Wonder spell, ready, which is something that's end game. It's like something that you're supposed to get fairly late in the game. So, you know, even with console commands, all of those steps took a bit of time to complete. And then, as I mentioned earlier, your reward is your spells cost 50% less casting points, and that's the world map casting points and the combat casting points. All rulers can cast an additional spell per turn in combat is something that could benefit your enemy more than it benefits you, depending on the spells that you have available to you and what your enemy has available to you. For example, if they have the Mystic variant that lets them use echoes to get more casting points, that will be basically 2 spells per turn forever, which you can try and aim for as somebody who's playing this version of Visions of Ruin. But if you don't and your opponent does have that ability, I just see this being a negative for you when you're trying to engage that opponent. The next Vision of Ruin we're going to look at is the Chaos variant. And I think because of my tendency to play in multiplayer, this is going to be slightly lower ranked than if you are playing in single player, because you can really get the most out of this advantage if you're able to basically kill a lot of enemy units belonging to another empire. But in multiplayer, people will probably recognize that you have this variant of the Visions of Ruin, and therefore avoid combat with you as much as possible, unless they're very certain they're going to win that combat and not lose a lot of units. Whereas in single player, there's usually a lot of opportunities to pick off enemy stacks that are just all over the map, and therefore it'll be easier to complete the objectives. But yeah, I think for me it's in C tier, but in single player you might argue it's like maybe even B or A tier because of the way the AI just operates. One thing I probably should have mentioned about the Astral variant of Visions of Ruin is that it does give you plus 10 mana per turn, which does make up for the fact that it takes so long to get the benefit out of this society trait. But I don't think that is super significant when you compare it to other society traits and the rewards you get for the other vision quests. There's also the fact that the chaos one here will give you a little bit of extra draft, and the shadow one will give you a little bit of extra souls when you take these versions of the visions of ruin. The requirements in order to complete this objective is to slay units that belong to other empires, to conquer cities, and to slay rulers. One interesting thing about that objective is that you need to kill a lot of units in order to complete this objective that way. I think each unit killed is just a single point, whereas slaying a ruler is 15 points. So as you can imagine, that'll take a long time to complete. And then you don't only have to do that objective, you have to complete you have to declare 2 wars with major justification, which is relatively hard to accomplish. It's not too difficult to accomplish if there are a lot of AIs on the map that you can build grievances up against. And if you're trying to get points by slaying units belong to an enemy empire, you may as well declare a war that's justified. That will just make it so that you have a better economy in general. I will admit the reward you get for completing these objectives is pretty good, and there must be a decent amount of points you get for conquering cities, because this is only 2 units and a ruler, which is 17 points, meaning that conquering a city must be worth at least 20 points in order to complete this objective one I did right here. And the power from slaughter is a pretty significant effect, combined with the fact that your units are going to get experience 50% faster. They should become very powerful over the course of a longer game. Not immediately, because getting +1 HP and 1% damage 1 or 2 times is not that amazing. But if you get that 50 times, your tier 1 units are going to be actually comparable to some of the tier 4 or so units. Maybe not as good as a tier 5 unit, because the tier 5 units have some very nice abilities and stats effects that they can interact with. But if you put Mighty Meek on your tier 1 units and then stack a bunch of modifiers on them, they can become quite powerful in general. You also have this other result: all rulers that are not allied have defensive pacts, or vassalized declare war on each other, and unvassalized free cities. So free cities are going to go to war with everybody if they're not vassalized, and then all rulers will end up just being at war. So the AI who weren't interacting with each other may end up just being at war and wasting their time trying to fight each other. All free cities that are not vassalized declare war on each other as well, meaning they won't want to send their units towards other players as often, or you as often. They'll probably be sending armies back and forth against each other, which is, fairly insignificant when you compare to this power of slaughter effect and the extra experience you get for completing the Visions of Ruin Chaos variant. The Shadow variant of Visions of Ruin is actually probably the best one out of the 3. I would say in general, getting extra souls is quite useful, and the reward you get for completing the questline is very nice. But I think that it does still take a while relative to some of these other quests, and that the reward isn't significant enough for me to like it more than some of these other quest lines. When you take a closer look at the objectives you need to complete to get the rewards from the Shadow variant of Visions of Ruin, one thing you'll notice is that it's actually fairly similar to some of the other ones, but it's a little bit easier to complete because it not only looks at the units that you kill, but also the units that you lose. So in a way, you can deliberately lose fights to try and complete this objective a little bit faster. And then raising cities is something that generally is pretty quick and gives you a nice reward. You get a lot of gold out of raising cities. So that one is, I think, not too crazy to complete. And if you are having trouble getting heroes in your crypt, one thing you can do is just recruit a hero to throw away. If you're getting gold from raising cities, it shouldn't be that expensive to just buy a hero, a cheap level 1 hero, and then throw them into stacks where they're just not going to win. And yeah, that counts towards heroes in your crypt. We just got 10 heroes in our crypt, so we're getting this Age of Death effect, which gives the Curse of Servitude, making it so that when this unit dies, it a decaying zombie is summoned underneath the Prophet's control. If you're playing with the shadow variant of Visions of Ruin, you are that Prophet. And it's saying that in combat, the Prophet's armies make it so all non-friendly units gain this. So it's basically your enemies are going to summon in units under your control when they die. And all non-undead units receive 50% less temporary hit points when healed. So it's going to make it so that if you're focusing on the shadow affinity, your undead units are not going to be affected by this. But if you aren't, or if your enemies are not focusing on undead units, it's going to be harder for them to heal their units up in combat. You also get souls per turn for being the Prophet, which you can see down here is 20 souls per turn. That's quite a significant number of souls per turn. And I think when you look at the requirements and the rewards, it becomes pretty obvious why I like this one more than the other Visions of Ruin. And yeah, that's everything that I had for you in this video. Thanks for joining me. I hope you have a good rest of your day.